Greetings to everyone watching. My name is Christy and I'm part of the team at Common Good that works to mobilize the church to engage and act justly. I'm joined today by these three amazing people who are going to tell us stories about their involvement in assisting homeless people during the COVID lockdown facing our country right now. So welcome Caroline Powell from the Warehouse, Richard Bolland from New Hope SA, and Phineas Sebatsana from Church of the Holy Spirit. Thank you all for joining me today. Caroline, as we kick off this conversation, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions to help us frame the current realities facing homeless people in Cape Town at the moment. Just three questions. So firstly, what has been the primary issue facing homeless people during this lockdown?
Well, yeah, so the primary issues we've discovered is that, as you rightly, when we were told all to stay at home, people living on the streets asked where. The first thing that happened when we all retreated inside was that informal support like casual employment, bin recycling, some soup kitchens, gifts of food, money and clothing from the general public all just stopped overnight, rendering street homeless people way more vulnerable than they were even before. And then, of course, there was the increased threat of the virus, as well as increased policing of people who were not adhering to lockdown regulations. I also do think that many churches that were involved in ad hoc responses to people who come to the door for emergency help, with churches being shut, this didn't happen anymore. The NGOs of the homelessness sector did an exceptional job of collaborating and ramping up their service provision, especially providing daily meals and advocacy, for example, to get the public taps that had been switched off since the drought switched back on so that homeless people could adhere to hygiene guidelines. But however, we also have to understand that the City of Cape Town estimates the numbers of homeless people to be at least half of what people in the NGO sector believe them to be. So no matter what the city was able to provide for people to safely shelter during lockdown, it was never going to be enough to provide for the actual numbers of people. And then the city opted for a mega camp strategy instead of initially helping to build the capacity of NGOs and churches and community action network groups. And so in this case, this was, in many cases, a traumatic option for people living on the streets to be taken so far away from where they've been living. And so many people avoided this and opted to stay where they were facing increasing vulnerability on the streets. And then, of course, since the camp is also closed, many others have returned to the streets in this increasingly dangerous time. So that's just a massive overview of what's been facing people living outside at this time.
Thank you. And you mentioned there about the numbers. How has this nationwide lockdown impacted the number of people who are homeless in Cape Town?
I think actually there's some good stories coming out of this. A few things have happened that have helped. So public awareness increased and the general public has worked harder than ever before to find options for their homeless neighbors. I would say there's the efforts of 3 churches, which you're going to hear about a bit later, and several NGOs that are approximately 120 extra people are being sheltered where they weren't before through the efforts of civil society. The Haven night shelters and other city-run spaces also increased their spaces that we're offering. And now there are winter storm shelters that U-Turn and other NGOs are helping churches and other spaces open for the heavy weather. So those are all potentially positive things that happen during this time. But then, as many of us are seeing, as we respond through our community action network groups and in our church networks, many people are just one step away through the loss of formal and informal employment, from not being able to pay rent where they live. And so it is expected that homelessness will increase in the next year. And I think a situation that I'm noticing through our networks that is on the increase is especially mothers and children becoming homeless as they've had to choose to buy a little bit of food with the money that they have instead of paying rent. So yeah, that's I think we're facing an increase in homelessness, even though the efforts to respond to it are increasing as well.
And lastly, is the pathway from living on the street to living in a home a simple one? Like, is it just about making sure there are enough houses for everyone?
No, I mean, we would say there's as many pathways out of homelessness as there are pathways into it, because it's individual people facing different scenarios in their own lives. But generally, there are, it seems to be there several phases of assistance that are offered to people coming out of street homelessness. Their first phase spaces where people are currently on the street, they go for assistance, drop-in centers and overnight shelters. And then there's sort of second phase spaces that offer recovery, rehabilitation, family reunification, counseling, emotional and spiritual healing, and of course, assistance with finding employment. And many of those spaces also offer accommodation where people can stay while they're going through this recovery process. But then there's the issue in a spatially divided and unjust city, actually, where people will live as they have come back onto their feet. And so that's the massive pipeline of affordable housing, social housing in our city, which is a much bigger topic to talk about. But there is a need for more space and provision at every one of these levels: the straight off the street space, the rehabilitation, recovery, and employment space, and then where to live out the rest of your life as you've recovered from living on the streets.
Yes. Thanks, Caroline. Thanks for just helping us frame some of the context for the stories we're going to hear. So Richard and Phineas, you are both working with the church to run a first phase microsite. I'd love for each of you just to take a few minutes to share with us a brief overview of how it started and how your specific microsite works. So Rich, do you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. So we started mainly as a NGO that wanted to assist, but also we were a member of St. Peter's congregation, and St. Peter's has a Thursday night congregation, which looks a little bit different to how a Sunday morning church would look. On Thursday nights, we share a meal together, we share stories about how our weeks were, we encourage each other in our faith. And so during lockdown, we realized that a lot of our Thursday night congregation was facing a really difficult time. A lot of people from Thursday night lived on the streets or were living in the Strandfontein homeless camp. And so we asked St. Peter's to respond to this by opening up their hall. And as of now, we've been running for almost 3 months as a microsite, and we'll hopefully continue till the end of November. As New Hope, we've been working in the sector for many years. And so we realized that we didn't want to just focus on accommodation, but try to include a recovery aspect to when people come into the microsite, as well as a work-based program where people can earn money while living on the microsite. And so they do that by making planter boxes, and then we sell those planter boxes to the public. We always planned to keep it small. We wanted to act responsibly and sustainably. And so we capped the numbers at around 10 in order to facilitate a more long-term pathway for those 10 beyond lockdown and beyond the microsite. It currently costs us around 20,000 Rand to operate the microsite a month. And that's with paying no rent. We get the hall and the building for free. We're currently fundraising to launch a more permanent microsite that we hope to continue once the church gets their building back. And so, yeah, our hope is that we continue way beyond kind of once the virus is finished and contained, that this becomes a permanent kind of homeless shelter or home for people trying to leave the streets.
Thanks, Rich. And your microsite is for men only, right?
That's right, yeah.
Okay. And Phineas, at Church of the Holy Spirit, tell us a bit about your microsite.
Yeah, I'm just going to copy and paste what just Rich said. So hope you don't mind, Rich. Well, first of all, thank you for having us on this. So basically how we started this, because I have a journalism and photography background, we basically just started 3 years ago sharing stories of the people who are homeless in Muizenberg. And, and then coronavirus came into the picture. And then from then it was a matter of, okay, the guys got to Strandfontein for 2 months. And a lot of them, when they came back, they were sober. And they came back to us and they said, okay, how do we stay sober? I want to stay sober. Now I can see black and colors. I was seeing, black and white. So they had this sober mentality of, what, I love being and feeling like a human being, and I want to continue with this process. And when they came back to us, we were like, okay, what do we need to do right now? And that's when we started, doing a mini protest, asking people around, can you please help us find a home? And Church of the Holy Spirit found out one of the stories of one of our ladies who has went through a tough time on the street, because a lot of women on the street, they are, sexually and physically abused. And that story became a magnet towards, Church of the Holy Spirit opening up their church, to help the ladies who are living on the street. And yeah, they offered us basically 3 months of hosting us in their church, without paying rent. They just told us not to break anything, which is awesome. Everything is still together. So, and then from then it has been a journey of, building relationship with the guys, and not really doing what is best for us, but what is best for them. Because I think for me, that's the best way to help homeless people. It's not to do what you think is best for them, but what is best for them. And from there, it has been a journey of just empowering them. And asking them what they really want and how we can journey with them. Because like Rich said, we wanted to give them more than just, food, and a shelter over them, but also to offer counseling to them, and get them to do stuff with their hands. Because a lot of homeless people, they're used to this. They're not used to giving. They're not used to being empowered. But the only way you can empower them is to see them as people who can be empowered. So you need to see their value, you need to see their identity. And the minute you started to see that, we started to say, these people are so capable and they can do great things. Just like Rich, they started a project with the men where they make stuff. So, but that can only happen if you see potential in them. So our view of homeless people started with how we see them, and from there we started to say, what do you guys like to do? And that's when we started to invite people who can come and do dancing with them, who can come and do some craft work with them, who can come and teach them how to cook, and you will be surprised, some of them, you live on the street, you live on the mountain, you don't learn how to make your bed, you don't learn how to cook, you don't learn how to clean. And for them to learn how to do that, even brushing your teeth, something as light as that we take for granted, them learning how to do that, it empowers them, so much to know that they can go and take a hot shower and look clean and look nice. And the minute they see themselves clean, they want to stay clean. And it has been a routine that we're doing every single day to help them see the way they see themselves, because we realize that, their behavior in terms of how they treat each other depends so much on how they view themselves. And that is being a journey of dealing with their identity, with their purpose and a sense of belonging.
It's incredible.
And just basically being house parents, not really managers, because what we're trying to restore is family, relationship, and friendship. And that's what leads to many of the people on the street. Is a sense of family, is a sense of relationship, a sense of relationship. Yes. And that's what we're trying to restore here, moving forward with them.
And Phineas, just to clarify, the NGO that is working with CHS is U-Turn.
Yeah. So me
microsite, and it's a women-only microsite. It's for women only.
Yeah. So me and my wife are basically full-time missionaries, and we've been working with these guys on the street, and we found out about U-Turn because we know that we don't have skills that they have.
Yes.
And we connected with them, and they said, we can help you guys in terms of running this microsite,
yes.
And seeing if we can, use this as an opportunity to filter who's ready to go to rehab,
yes.
or to reconcile with their families, or to be helped to find a job or something like that. So U-Turn helps us in terms of giving skills that we don't really have at this moment.
Great. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Phineas, for sharing those stories. I'm also, one last story as we wrap up. Caroline, I know you've also been involved in helping another church in the CBD to advocate for a group of homeless people. Can you share that story quickly with us, please?
As the story unfolded in the last few months over the pandemic, churches have contacted us at the warehouse to ask how they can help, and also community action network groups in neighborhoods have contacted us to find out how they can get in touch with their local churches to draw them into what they were doing. And so this story is about a community action network group with a group of gentlemen living in a park in the CBD in Gardens, and they had been trying to find a place for them to live throughout And so I put them in contact with the church in Gardens, and the church offered space for the guys living in the park to be able to run their affairs from. They weren't able to offer space to run a microsite for various reasons, but they said, use our space to run your affairs from, to get your donations of food, to cook, and to sort of live out of the space from time to time during the day. But then they, yes, there was disappointment that they couldn't offer space for the people to live, but they remained involved in the story. And so with the Community Action Network group, with the group of people living in the park and the church together, all three of them went on a journey of trying to find accommodation for the guys to move into. And that's when, as with all of these stories of what Phineas and Richard have just shared with us, the combination of then joining up with an NGO, and in this case it was actually the Haven Night Shelters, and together you had the Haven, the church, the guys in the park, and the CAN group all searching and looking for accommodation. They found a local lodge that was willing to rent out the space. Money was raised between these different groups, and then the church was able to be part of standing in the gap for ensuring that the guys in the park could rent the lodge and have somewhere safe to live out of for the duration of the rest of the lockdown. So I thought that was an interesting story of how you can, even if you can't offer perhaps what's initially being asked for, if you stay involved and you follow the story as a church, and start to advocate and use your networks, then actually the result of people being sheltered and safe and cared for and feeling like they're loved neighbors can still happen.
So it's wonderful just to hear so many different stories of how churches are stepping up and getting involved and helping homeless people. And so as we wrap up this conversation, I'd like to ask each of you to share one idea with us with our viewers of how we can get involved or participate or respond as individuals at this time. Phineas, can I start with you?
I mean, from our side, it's a matter of, because right now, even with the church, we have to basically have an exit plan, which we have at this point in terms of where we take these ladies. And one of the things that we're looking into, there's a possibility for U-Turn to open a soup kitchen in Muizenberg. But it's not going to be just a soup kitchen. It's going to be a place where those who are homeless and want to be helped further into U-Turn programs will be identified. So there will be a session and then a meal, and there will be counseling being offered there, for those who probably want to go to rehab, because we realize that also even after the coronavirus, I mean, homelessness is going to be a big thing. That's the next pandemic we have to deal with, and we have to be prepared and establish areas where people can come and know that there's help, and then go there and find help. And what we need most of the time is just a matter of finding volunteers. People who are willing to come and serve. Not everybody can give money, but people can come and give their time.
If there are people listening who want to give their time, how can they get in touch with you, Phineas?
Basically, what they can do is I can either give them my email or give them my number to get in contact with us. You'll
find a way of attaching that information to the
find a way of doing that. Yeah. So I can give them those details, and if they want to support us financially in terms of taking these ladies or the gentlemen that we work with into rehab, because rehabs are very expensive, and we are fortunate right now that we can run what we're doing with the churches for free. We're very grateful for that, but the biggest obstacle right now is how do we take those guys to rehab? How do we make sure that, they have the rehab have the finances to help them? So if people want to help financially, they can just connect with U-Turn, and I can also offer the details of U-Turn to see how they can assist us moving forward with those who want to go to rehab.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah.
Cool. Rich, how can we support the microsite?
There are two main ways. We are currently running a fundraiser to turn the temporary microsite into a permanent shelter. So if you would like to give financially to that, that would be incredible. And that will be going, for the rest of this year. So we'd love you to give to that. And then we are looking for volunteers specifically to facilitate courses on the microsite. You don't necessarily need to be skilled in anything, but if you're able to commit to a month of volunteering want all the help we can get, but at the same time, we want to be sustainable in our help. And so we're asking for volunteers to commit to a month or 2 months of giving their time. And it doesn't have to be, every single day, just once a week. And we can plan around courses for the guys to do and for those people to facilitate those courses. So, and all you need to do is go to newhopesa.org and send us a message on there through email or the forms, and you can get involved.
Thank you. Thanks. That's perfect, Rich. And Caroline, lastly, any?
Yeah, I think, it's really important to not get stuck into thinking that there's just one way that a church can respond. But it's also really important that churches don't say things like, we don't have a specific calling to respond to homelessness, but rather to think of it that we have a calling to love our neighbor, those who live in houses and those who don't. And so in order to explore how your church might fit into, whether it's first phase or second phase, being part of a network of people who employ people, whether it's actually thinking about how your church wants to be involved in long-term solutions for affordable housing and social housing, intervening with women and children who find themselves homeless. There's just a wide variety of things that the city needs, and that churches can explore how to be part of, how, especially, as we are not meeting in our buildings for however long. What are we doing with empty spaces, standing empty, waiting to be filled again? Well, actually, could we reimagine how we want to be church so that those spaces could be filled on a much more permanent basis going forward? So if you want to explore any of those types of ways of discerning as a church, the Warehouse is very keen to walk with you in that and to help you discern together what that looks like for you as a church. So you're welcome to contact me on the details that will be provided, and we will make an arrangement to meet with you and to talk it through.
Well, thank you, all of you. I appreciate you all so much, and thank you for taking the time to join me today, and have a wonderful day further. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.